Hi. Today I wanted to show you guys how we can use GitHub to store kind of backups of our projects and have version control. So we could like save a backup of it, and if things go horribly wrong, we can always like revert back to an older version of it, which is awesome. And the other nice thing about this is later on, if you are doing Unity projects where you're working and collaborating with other people, GitHub becomes a nice central repository where everyone can kind of download each other's changes and push them back. So to start, we need to do two things. Number one, go to github.com. You can just Google GitHub and make an account here. It's free. We just need to make an account here. GitHub is a company owned by Microsoft, and it runs a software called Git. Git itself is the version control software. Git is free. There's many other like companies that have softwares that use Git as their versioning. GitHub is just Microsoft's like online repository for it. So the nice thing about GitHub is it provides us like a free place to store our repository, similar to how Google Drive lets you know store files online. GitHub lets us store files online, specifically Git projects. There's one limitation with it being free, and that is we cannot store any file, any single file that is larger than 100 megabytes. It doesn't matter if our whole project is bigger than 100 MB, but and we can't have a single file that goes over 100 megabytes. And with Unity projects, this tends not to be an issue, which is why when we use Unreal, for example, we tend to use Perforce as our versioning system, not GitHub, just because Unreal files tend to be large and can easily get bigger than 100 megabytes. For Unity, GitHub is perfect. So start, make your account on GitHub, and then Google GitHub Desktop. That should take us to a website called GitHub Desktop where we can download it. Once it's downloaded, just open it up, install it, and then we can open up GitHub Desktop. So I'm just going to search for it and open it up. When you open this up for the first time, it's going to prompt you to log in. I've already done that. And once you've logged in, we should have a screen like this. Your screen would probably say that you have no repositories. I currently, I think, have two in here. So on the right, we have my Unity project. This folder, this 326-test has a folder in it that's 326-test, and that is the project folder. This is where I want my repository to be made. What I'm going to do is I'll go to File, New Repository, and I will select, let's just pretend I was in my Unity folder. I will select the folder that I want, this 326-test, and hit Select Folder. It is going to select that folder, but it is not going to let me create it yet. We need to give this repository a name. It's a small quirk with the GitHub Desktop app. If I type any name in here, for example, 326 test, I type this in with spaces. You can see it says will be created as 326-test. So if your folder had any spaces in its name, it's just not going to be happy with that, and it's going to tell us that it's going to make a it's going to change the spaces to dashes. But if we look all the way down at the bottom, it says this repository will be created at the folder name 326-test/326-test. So what it's doing is going to create a new folder inside this folder and make a new repository there, which is not what I want. I also cannot leave this name blank because it won't let me create it. So one kind of workaround we can do is just put a period there, like a dot, and that dot kind of symbolizes this current folder. Not sure why it's like this, but this is just kind of the way to work around it. So we just name the folder a dot, and now if I read the repository path, it says it'll be created at F projects Unity 326-test, 326-test. That is the folder that I expect it to be created in, right? Lastly, we just where it says git ignore, we want to select this none and search for Unity. There's Unity. And we just want to make sure we select Unity for our git ignore file. All this git ignore file is a text file that tells the repository which files we can safely ignore. So there's some files here like user settings, our project settings. These are going to be different for everyone. We don't really need to upload these, right? Because when someone else opens a project, Unity can generate these files for them. So this Unity git ignore it makes it easier setup because it's already kind of written. It already writes every file that we need to ignore. I'll hit create repository. And it might take a while, it might not. What you will see if we just go back to our folder here is a new folder called .git has been added. You can see that the color of this folder is a little different. I could also make it bigger. Let's just view it by large icons. You can see there's a .git folder. This .git folder has a little slightly different color. It's what's known as a hidden folder. If you cannot see this folder, you just need to click on View, Show, Hidden Items. This is specifically for Windows. If you're on a Mac, I'm not too sure what the UI is like. You'd probably just be able to see this. If not, just Google how to see hidden folders on a Mac. So wherever this .git folder is, we know that this folder is now a Git repository. You can also see there's this .git ignore file, which if I was to open with, we'll just open it with Visual Studio. You can see it's just a text file, right, with a bunch of like file types. There's some folders in here. It is just telling our GitHub which files to ignore. Finally, we can come back to our GitHub desktop where you should see that, we have this folder here now. And I'm just going to hit publish repository. It is going to ask me the name of this repository. And we will just want to make sure this check mark for keep this code private is checked. If you want to have a public repository for some reason, you can uncheck it. Doesn't really matter. We'll hit publish. And we can see in our history this initial commit. If I go from changes to history, and you can see this initial commit contains all the files that, are in my project, because we're going to be, this is going to be the first time we're committing all these files are all new. If I go back to GitHub, the website, I have a bunch of repositories here, but we can just go to the search bar really, and I can start typing the name of the repository, just 326 test, and you can see that under my username, I have 326 test. If I click on this, you can see that these are all my files, right? If I go into assets, I can see that rollerball file that I have. So they're all here. Okay, so now we have this, we've uploaded it. What now? So I have this project open. The general workflow from GitHub is going to be when you start your project, if you were working with other people, you would come onto GitHub desktop, you would hit this fetch origin button. What that's going to do is fetch any changes from github.com. Obviously, we're working as individuals on these projects, so we're using GitHub mostly as a backup, but it's just good to know, first step, always fetch our origin. We don't want to be working on an older version. We want to work on the latest version, right? And then we can start doing our work. So maybe I open up this rollerball file. I can add like a comment to it. I can save it. Maybe also I take this wall, it's some asset that I've made, and I make it a prefab. And there you go. All in a day's, good work. I'm going to come back to my GitHub desktop. And here now in this changes tab, I can see the changes that I have made. You can see we've added assets wall 3 prefab. There's also a meta file for it. I've made some change to the Unity scene, which in this case, that change was that this wall 3 went from being a regular game object into a prefab. And then I can also see the change I've made in Rollerball. Because Rollerball is a text file that's meant for us to read, you can even see I've deleted a line of white space that's symbolized by this minus red kind of thing. And then I added a comment. It says plus and it's a green line and it says this file is cool. That's the comment that I added, which is also another neat little feature. We can see the changes. The cool thing about Git as version control is we're not saving a copy of the project each time. All we are saving, the only thing we're saving is the changes made to it. And so this is what makes Git incredibly efficient, because we're not like saving actual copies of the project. The file size never gets out of hand. We are only saving the changes. Obviously, there's a lot more to how GitHub works, a lot more things you can do with it. We are just using it, to keep kind of timestamps of our project that we can always revert back to in case things break. Anyway, I have these changes. I'm going to add a summary. A summary is required. In the summary, we just put a short description. So I could say something like edited roll a ball. And then under this description, this is where you want to put a longer kind of description of the text. So the summary is a heading. The description is going to be, if I've made specific changes and I want to lay them out, we'd put them in the description. So I could say something like added a comment to the file, made wall prefab. And this is really good to do even when we're just storing our own versions. Even if you're not working with other people, we don't need to write an essay here, but it's good to write down most of the changes we've made, specifically because if we want to revert back to a change, a previous version, we only have these notes to go off of as to like what was that version about. So write down our changes, and I'm going to hit commit files to main. And then there's a button here that says push origin. You click that, and that's going to sync it with GitHub. This commit to main, that just commits it locally, and pushing it pushes it to the website. If I go to history, you can see now there's my initial commit, and just now I had a new commit called edit rollable. If I was to go back to the website, right here, go back to this repo, we can see that next to my name here, it says edited rollable. If we have multiple people working on this repo, this line will just show the last commit, who made it, and what was the commit about. Anyways, that was a short video about using GitHub just to keep backups of our project. I highly suggest everyone starts getting in the habit of doing this. Very useful, very nice to have. You can even delete the project off your computer at some point. It's just still on GitHub as long as GitHub's around. It's a great tool to use, especially for Unity projects or any kind of project where we're not going to have massive file sizes. Thank you guys for watching.